Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host. And just a couple things right off the bat. I think the internet's going to be okay. I moved to a cabin. It's been an issue, and I've been investing in these different. I have this new unit that is supposed to work just fine. All right, everyone. So on with our guests. The main guest, lead guest, is Zen. I never really knew. I've emailing you since 2013, and I don't know how to pronounce your last name.
It's actually Benefiel. You said Benefiel, which is kind of interesting because the name actually.
Sorry about that.
No, no apologies necessary. That's.
I don't know how I put the D in there, but anyway.
Well, it's funny, Benefiel. I was orphaned and adopted as a kid, and my last name Benefiel actually means good fidelity. So it's been a great one to look in the mirror at.
How about that? And we have, for those of you on that are watching on Facebook and other channels, YouTube, etc., we have Waldo in the background. I can see Waldo. You found Waldo. Yeah.
He's still looking, but he's working on finding himself.
Yeah. Aren't we all?
Yeah.
So let's hear about, like I said, you've been at this for a long time. So let's hear your background and where it's led you. And also with the UFO connection.
Well, if you got a few hours, no, I'll truncate most of it because it's kind of old hat to me because it's my life, right? And so it's been normal. I mentioned I was orphaned at birth and adopted early. When I found out, my adopted sister came home. I was 4 and 4 months or something like that, and so my parents decided to tell me about what adoption was about, which led me to questioning, about my biologicals and even, are there others, or is there a mother and father in heaven? Now, this was young kids' ideas, right? So I'm guessing a few months later, I was on the landing of the stairway in our home. We had a 2-story house, and I was looking out the window, and my elbows on the sill and my hands, or my chin in my hands, and it was after dark. All of a sudden I hear this, "Hey, you." And it was, 10 times deeper than that and much more resonant. And I didn't answer it at the time. I spun around and asked my mother, who was sitting at the bottom of the stairs watching TV, and the voice certainly wasn't from that. And I said, "Mom, do you hear that voice?" And she goes, "No, what voice?" I said, "That voice." I said, "Hey, you." And she said, "No, I didn't hear anything. Must have been a peeping Tom." Right. So, and our town had one. So I found out later. So that's how it started. And I knew even at that point, I did not question my own direct experience. I heard that voice. Nobody was going to tell me I didn't. And so I developed this conversation with it over time. How it started was I would stand in front of windows at night with the lights on, so there would be the reflection, and couldn't see out. And I would project telepathically that same, "Hey, you." And I would stand there and I would wait for that response. And I tried it several times and just waited, and finally it responded. And over time, I developed a conversation and was able to ask a lot of questions and get answers. And so this was very unique, perhaps not uncommon, but at least it was something that I couldn't talk to my parents about. I couldn't talk to anybody about. So there was this side of life for me that was already a bit bizarre. Then we moved to a new house my dad had built. And 7 years old, I'm guessing, I came back from playing out in the neighborhood with a bunch of kids one Saturday afternoon, laid down on my bed because I was tired, and closed my eyes, and I felt my body tingling, and I felt like I was going to leave my body, and I got scared. And this voice said, "Just breathe and relax and let go." I'm like, okay. So I did, and I popped out of my body. And it was the very first time. And of course, as soon as I started thinking, I popped back in my body. And so over time, I suppose the next year or so, I experimented with it, and I would get into those places, and it wasn't something that I could necessarily call on demand. It would happen spontaneously. And then about 8 years old, I woke up in bed one night. Actually, I wasn't in bed. I was up in the corner of my bedroom looking at my physical body laying in bed. And I watched my body get out of bed, open my window, climb out. And of course, then my observer kind of moved through the wall, and I watched myself walk across a neighbor's backyard, climb a fence that was surrounding a 10-acre pasture. And as I started to walk out into the pasture, I watched my body start to raise up in the air. And I looked up, and there was this huge orange cigar-shaped cloud that must have been a mile long. And I had these kinds of observer participant. Actually, when I reached the perimeter of the cloud, what I'm calling the observer self became one with the participant, and I'd go into the cloud. I'd wake up in bed the next morning, couldn't wait to go back. I was just like this excited kid, you know. Then over the years, it happened for, you know, at least twice a month for a couple of years. And then I'm going to fast forward to 1981. I was walking through a metaphysical bookstore in Muncie, Indiana, and there was only a couple other people in the shop besides me. And this book falls off the shelf a few feet in front of me. And I'm looking around, there's nobody else there. And I'm like, So I walk over, and books face up or cover up on the floor. And it was Ruth Montgomery's Strangers Among Us. And so I'm like, interesting. And I pick it up. First paragraph that I read, paraphrased, said something like, the most common UFO contactee experience in the Midwest in the late 50s and early 60s was the orange cigar-shaped cloud. Had not even thought about it until that moment. And so it was like a domino effect where all of these things just all of a sudden coalesced into this, oh shit, right? Now, and in between that time now, in college, I didn't really have much happen during my high school years. I was a jock and an academic, and I was busy with social life and all that kind of stuff. But at 18, when I entered college, beginning of the second quarter, I hit my knees, and I'm one of those guys that prays occasionally. And I hit my knees and I prayed one of the most fervent prayers I've ever made. And Father, I want to know what truth is, and I'm willing to die for it if necessary. Now, truth to me was reality. What's reality? How's it work? And what's my part in it? And about a week later, I came back from class. It was November 11th, 1975. It was on a Tuesday afternoon. And I'm laying in bed, or across my bed, listening to Journey's first album. I kind of did the obligatory come back from class and album side meditation. And that voice that I was familiar with, now my given name's Bruce, the voice says, Bruce, are you willing to die for what you believe in? And, I clenched up to begin with because, oh my God, okay, what do I believe in? And my first consideration was Christ consciousness. Didn't feel full as I anticipated it should. So I dismissed that and I went on to cosmic consciousness. That felt full for some reason. And so I said yes. And at that instant, there was a guitar riff that Neil Sean does that sounds like a rocket ship taking off. The song is called In the Morning Day. And I feel a tug at my solar plexus and I'm out of my body. I turn to look at my body laying across my dorm room bed. I turn back to look where I'm going. And before I can get fully turned around, I'm engulfed by white light. And it was the most amazing, iridescent, effervescent feeling that also had this really high-pitched frequency along with it. And I was analyzing it, so I realized I was thinking. And so at that point, I knew I wasn't dead. And then the impetuous teenager took over, and here I am in this light. There's nothing else but me and my thoughts. And I thought, wow, is there more? And so I feel this movement, and I'm in almost an opposite background. There's an indigo background with points of light surrounding me. And my first question, of course, was, what are they? And the intuitive answer, maybe it was the voice, maybe it was just my own recognition, was that these were points of consciousness, whether in body or not. I wasn't sure because I knew I wasn't. And then the voice picked back up, and this blew me away and still does today. It says, these are those that you are to work with in order to facilitate a new world order. It will happen in your lifetime. Know this to be true. Your path will be full of trials and tribulations. Have faith and trust that everything that you need will be there at its appointed time. Trust and allow. Now, the thing about trials and tribulations, what an understatement. The New World Order is not something that some cabal is instigating. It was one of harmony among people and planet. That's how I understood it at that time. Now, for 40 years, I thought, no, I'm going to have to live to be 150 because it ain't happening. No matter what I wrote or what I said or, things that I did, it just didn't seem to be catching anything. So here comes COVID and the Great Reset and this new normal. And so now we have this opportunity. And I told my wife at the time, who's wonderful woman, she's from St. Petersburg, Russia, very brilliant thinker and a conservatory trained pianist. So, and she was taught about the solfeggio tones at 5. So, there's this depth of understanding that she already had before we got together, which was just magnificent because I finally had someone I could talk to openly and not feel and be vulnerable enough to express my deepest thoughts and considerations. So I told her, I said, I hope that this obsession on self-hygiene and the sequestration will turn people inward and get them to examine themselves. And normally behavior modification programs will do that. Most people don't realize that that's exactly what was happening, that this fallacious narrative was designed to get us all afraid of each other, which means we're much more easy to control at that point. So free thinkers, perish the thought. But anyway, back to the experience and the UFOs and things like that. So my interest was there to begin with. And when we moved to Phoenix in 1981, the efforts started a little more demonstratively and regularly in the types of experiences. And I'd find myself, all of a sudden I felt like I was on board this ship, and I felt this really deep, pulsing, almost a biomechanical pulse that was just barely audible, but it was easily felt. And one of the things that began in that was I had all kinds of questions because I figured, okay, here's a place to ask them, right? So with every question, I had a potential answer. And every time I would go through that process, there was this, it was like appeared like a wormhole with concentric circles, and it was a grayish, whitish kind of thing. And Contact did a really good job at giving a graphic example of what that looked like when Ellie went down through it. So, and I would go down through this, and I would stop, and I would ask another question and offer another answer, and I'd go down another one. And so this happened. I thought it was only gone for about 5 minutes, and I looked at the clock prior to going in, so to speak, and when I came back, I opened my eyes and looked over at the clock, and it was almost exactly an hour later. Woke my wife up, told her, my ex-wife now, and told her what I just experienced, and scared her. Understandably so, right? Because most people don't go through that kind of stuff, let alone talk about it. Even as a teenager, after I went through the white light, my parents sent me to a psychiatrist, and after the 3rd visit, he says, Bruce, you're not crazy. You've gone through a spiritual awakening. Why so young? I'm not sure, but I would advise not to talk to anybody because they're not going to understand you. Well, the following year, I bought a couple of sets of drums with my room and board money and had to move out of the dorm in the middle of winter. Ended up getting beat up at a frat house looking for a warm place. It was 70 below zero wind chill factor that night. It was January 10th of 1977, and ended up at the hospital, and the dean of admissions was waiting there. He was a personal friend of my father's, and he told me, once I got out, I had a nasty cut over my eye, and I got stitched up and was trying to talk to him. It was about 3:00 in the morning, and he wasn't having any of it. And I could understand why he was upset. But my dad showed up, and I said, "Oh, okay, I'm ready to go home." And he says, "No, I don't think so. I think you need to stay for a little bit." And I'm thinking, okay, blow to the head, possible concussion, overnight observation. Yeah, I'm cool with that. And these two orderlies walk up, and they escort me over to the elevator and up to the 7th floor. Doors opens up, and there's this big black guy sitting in a chair, and he comes down off the chair, stands up, grabs a wad of keys off his belt loop, and says, "Oh, got another one for me, huh?" And so that started another short adventure. And that was a crushing blow to me. And I tried to talk to the shrink there about my experiences and what was going on and what I was trying to deal with and understand and navigate through life, and still, do my studies and go to school and things like that. And he wouldn't have any part of it. I got labeled a manic depressive paranoid schizophrenic, and they put me on 2,000 milligrams of Thorazine a day. I was supposed to be a lump in the corner. It didn't happen. I was up playing ping pong. They couldn't figure me out. So, so I can relate to those people who have gone through these kind of traumatic experiences where nobody's understood them. They wanted to, institutionalize them and have. So I have great empathy for that. And yet here I am. I'm still talking. I'm still alive. My dad, a couple of years before he passed, finally said, I understand you. My greatest fear was that you would say the wrong thing in the right place and they would put you away. And I said, well, Dad, I've been in Phoenix for 35 years and I'm still free. So I think I'm okay. And, and I had, great jobs. I was in the aerospace industry. I was a production control coordinator in charge of $7 million a month in shipments. No slouch can do that. And then I've got a couple of master's degrees in business, and I've been working with entrepreneurs and business and life coaching and those kinds of things for years. I taught high school for half a dozen years, and then wrote a business plan for a model community for at-risk kids. So those are, kind of some ancillary things that went along with that. Now, I left the aerospace industry in 1989, early 1989, and the following year was kind of and went through a divorce. It's actually final on 11/22/88, kind of interesting numbers, but very powerful for me. And the release of that, had 4 kids, so it tore me up emotionally for quite some time. But the next year was reconnecting with self and exploring myself and finding those things that I had been absent in my life for a decade or so. And then I started producing a television show called One World. And I used a name that I'd been given during a conversation on a full moon in 1988. I was in a conversation with a guy who was about 15 years my senior. And our conversation had fallen quiet, and they were deep conversations as normal. I don't know that I have any cursory conversations anymore, or even then. But I closed my eyes and I asked the question, who am I? Silently. And I hear his chair move. I turned to look at him, and I locked on his eyes, and the first words out of his mouth were, "You are Zendor." And my second sight kicks on, and I see the starscape with a huge stone arch doorway and a thick wooden door slowly opening towards me. And I hear "Door to what is." Now, again, even with the weird stuff, what do you do with that? Even right? So I put it on the shelf, and then I pulled it out when I was producing, hosting the show. Kind of a door to what is, because my format for the show was to talk to people who'd been through their own experiences, personal and professional, and talking to them about what prompted them to do what they're doing from both inner and outer perspectives, what fears they encountered, more importantly, how they overcame them, how they saw that fitting into the common experience around them, and so forth. So Zendor was an appropriate subheading for it. And about 6 shows in, one of the guys on the set calls me Zen. And that's how that began. It was in
Huh.
1990.
Ah,
So,
yeah.
it was really tough for me to take for a little bit because I had issues with people changing their names when I was in college in the 70s. So here I am faced with this. It's like, oh shit, here, And I gradually acquiesced to it. I never have legally changed my name, but I've gone by Zen for over 30 years now.
Ah, wow. So when you were in the aerospace industry,
Mm-hmm.
did you ever speak to anyone else about your interest in UFOs? And I also want to talk to you about your website you started a long time ago, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's how we first got introduced. Um, I did. I actually, when you're in places and you're paying attention, you're aware and you're really observant and participative in the present, you get these promptings, to just reach out or say something or open your mouth or just listen more intently to the other person. And oftentimes they will mention something that allows you to bring the subject up. And so there were
Yeah.
probably half a dozen different people there. I was also involved with an organization called the New Age Alliance at the time, and I was kind of their PR guy. I was interviewed for a conference that we put together in 1988 at the Biltmore Hotel here in Phoenix, and it was one of the first of its kind. It was called A Metaphysical Coming Together, and I was interviewed on KTAR Radio, which is one of the largest AM stations in the Southwest. And man, did I get beat up. Nobody wanted to talk about the conference. They wanted to question my beliefs. And so I had to dodge everything. And the interviewer, the guy's name was Mel Young, he did a great job at fielding those comments and redirecting. But they were kind of pointed. And I wasn't uncomfortable. I was able to answer them pretty well. I didn't get rattled because it was something it's like, okay, I'm used to this. Right.
Yeah.
So
what was going back to the website,
yeah,
Ufology Press, what was the driving force for you to begin that?
opportunity. I'd been interviewed by a gentleman named Adam Abraham in January of 2012 and or 2013, I'm sorry. And he and I went to this a business. I can't remember what the name of it was at the time, but the principal, the owner of the company, had an interest in UFOs. They built a wireframe system that basically you could curate any topic. And he and I got to talking about it, and his interest in UFOs was piqued. And he said, "Hey, let's do this," right? And he just gave the opportunity to me. And so I spent the next month accumulating all the blogs that I could. Yours was one, Kevin's was another, right? And so I put all of this in the RSS feeds, and it had other features as well, and launched it. And our debut was at the International UFO Congress in 2013.
Oh yeah.
So it was funny. I know John Rao, who at that point owned the IU International UFO Congress.
Yeah.
And he came up, and I'd known him for a couple of years. And I said, "Hey, John, come over here, take a look at this." And first thing he said, "You're not going to make any money off that." That wasn't my intent, right? My intent behind it was to demonstrate a collaborative action of everyone focused on ufology in one place, whether it was true, whether they were actually collaborating or not. I wanted to have a virtual example that included everyone, because I'm that kind of guy. Everybody needs to be involved, right? And I think you've noticed that in my efforts. I'm a nice guy.
Yeah.
Or I do my best, and with this kind of topic, there's a lot of riffraff, there's a lot of accusations, there's a lot of backstabbing, there's all kinds of stuff that actually came up, and I was able to talk about with Jeffrey Mishlove in an interview that he did with me in 2018, which was also a 28-year dream come true. When I first started One World, I had two guys that I wanted to emulate as far as my interviewing style, and that was Jeff Mishlev and Bill Moyers. And I hoped someday I would be worthy of an interview with one of them. In 2018, Jeff reached out to me through the voicemail feature on the ancillary blog, which is UfologyPRSS with an E, and said, "Hey, I just did this, interview with Jason Giordani, I think was his name, on the Greys, and I think your audience might be interested in it." And before he even announced who he was, I recognized his voice, and then my heart just started pitter-pattering, right? Because here it is, possible dream come true. And so I watched the interview, wrote a blog post, posted it along with embedding the interview, sent him the link, and sent him a PDF copy of my book, Stubbing My Toe on Purpose. And 3 days later, I got an email back from him, "Hey, would you like to come talk about it?" So we went up on August 11th and 12th of that year and did not one, but three conversations. The first one was on the New World Order. And this was his choice. The second was on the sociology of ufology, and the third was on hearing voices. So to me, it gave me the opportunity to speak with one of the greats that, at least in some circles, right? And I garnered some credibility with that. So it was huge for me.
Mm-hmm. So what do you, one of the things that people ask me a lot is, what is the connection, or what do you feel the connection is between consciousness and UFOs?
Everything.
Okay, let's hear what you.
Okay, so I'll start by going back to what Kevin was talking about, and the government's inept investigations. There was a guy named Wilbert Smith.
Oh yeah, in Canada.
Right, he ran Canada's UFO investigations in the 1950s. It was called Project Magnet. Now, I got to give credit to Grant Cameron, who I've known for a while. He posted Wilbert's memoirs. It's called The New Science, and it's got gaps in it as far as information that wasn't included. It was published in 1964, right? And so here's this obscure book that nobody apparently knew about, but he had conversations with what he called people from elsewhere. And they talked to him about several concepts of consciousness and how reality works, how awareness and reality are tethered, and that our concept of time is kind of out of whack. That to them, time is a measurement of the change of entropy, and that we don't understand. There's something that they said that one of their foundations is the understanding of nothingness, right? We may call that the void, where everything comes from. And then there were several other things that if this were discussed a little more openly, that we might have some progress, because the consciousness that we are able to engage isn't just in the physical body, it's across multiple dimensions. Speaking of dimensions, Vernon Neppe and Edward Close wrote a paper on quantum physics and the nature of reality, and they came up with triadic dimensional distinction vortical paradigm, TDVP for short. And what they posit is that consciousness, space, and time are tethered across 9 dimensions for our physical reality. Doesn't exclude more dimensions, but just in our own consciousness, that we are tethered through 9 dimensions. Now, I'd had an experience in 1989 during that period where I was reassessing life and getting acquainted with myself again. I had the opportunity to experience multi-plane awareness technique, which was discovered or created by a guy named William Swigard also in the 1950s. And basically, it's a facilitated process where the experiencer is taken through accessing the light body, astral body, projecting it above you, projecting your consciousness in it, and then traveling through 9 planes of consciousness, assimilating the bodies on those planes, looking out through their eyes, and then returning and dropping the bodies off. And we got to the 12th plane, and I heard the facilitator said, okay, I want you to get ready to come back. And I'm just like, okay, I came back and opened my eyes, and the first thing he said was, uh-oh. I'm like, what? And he said, you weren't supposed to do that. You're supposed to drop those bodies off. And I said, oh, well. And so what happened was the next couple of weeks, I woke up in the middle of the night to this party in my room, not realizing what it was until I had the opportunity to have a gal spend the night with me. And she was a well-known psychic. And I was hoping, well, maybe she'll pick something up. I mean, there was no, she left her daytimer there, and so there wasn't a relationship involved. But it was just late enough that I said, hey, why don't you just crash here? And so she did. And middle of the night, she wakes up, and first thing she says, my God, how can you sleep in here? There's got to be at least a dozen different beings in this room. And at that point, I realized, oh, that's me. I was hearing songs and tones and voices and just all kinds of mixed up noise that just sounded like a big party. And initially, it startled me, and it woke me up. And then over time, it got to where I got more comfortable with it. And it's like, oh, yeah, okay, it's me. So those kinds of things tend to edify the 9-dimensional model that Neppy and Close formulated. And this is what I look for, right? Because experiencers have a lot of different things go on. I look for congruence. Where can we cross-reference enough things to where there's a consistent stream or consistent theme of information and potential awareness and understanding, right? Because these things are available. Now I understand it as, we live in quantum entanglement, whether we realize it or not, law of attraction, right? We don't consider that how we think and feel actually connects with everything around us. And this is what the guys, or like Smith calls them, the people from elsewhere, they're trying to get us to be more conscious, to be more aware of what we do, how we do it, why we do it, and to learn how to work together better, because that's in our nature. It's by design. We have no clue what our design is. We argue about it through all the different religions, right? But the core of those religions all say the same thing, that we are that. And so I put together a short video not too long ago about referencing that, my understanding coming back from that white light experience that was unequivocal was we are cosmic consciousness condensed into form. We just don't understand it or how to work with it. So this process of understanding quantum entanglement, we each have that point of light within us, so to speak. Same ones I saw, right, as I described earlier. And that point of light goes back and forth between the great light and physical incarnation. Well, at some point, we begin to get a clue that, oh, okay, there's more here, and it's an unknown to begin with. And most of us are afraid to explore that because we don't know what's there, and we're steeped in fear-based belief systems. So in order to do that, you kind of have to take on this fear, this attitude, and mine was especially present because when I went into the light, I realized I could think, and therefore I wasn't dead. So the fear of death was just evaporated, right? Now, that doesn't mean I'm not afraid to step out from a bus. Right? That kind of stuff's kind of stupid. But for the exploration of consciousness and other beings, other worlds, I have never had a negative experience, and I've met dozens of different beings from all kinds of worlds. Some of them, their energy is really intense, And so if you're not prepared for it, it's going to feel, you're going to have a fight or flight prompt. And then you have to really, have enough presence and awareness in yourself to go, oh, okay, just let that go and just kind of balance out and meet the energy. And when you do, man, it's like ecstasy without taking the drug.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Now,
Okay, so we're going into break in just 2 minutes. So in your experiences, have you ever actually witnessed like a structured craft, or is this all?
yeah. I actually woke up on board a craft in 1991. I was on a steel gurney. There were 3 tall grays that were kind of plastered up against the wall because I woke up laughing. And I sat up and I'm like, come on, guys, because I had electrodes lining my sphincter. And I was like, come on, guys, just embarrassed. I'm like, what are you doing? I start pulling the things out, and I get to the last one, and it feels like a pulling a pubic hair, a little bit of a sting. And I open my eyes up, and I'm back in bed again. And I'm like, oh shit! I had this perfect opportunity to have a discussion. I just blew it, and because I wasn't afraid at all. And so I closed my eyes again, and I'm like, okay, how do I go back? And I'm trying like crazy to go back, and I'm not getting there. And then all of a sudden, I had encountered this cloaked, by cloaked, I mean a kind of a gown, black and white shimmering. And this male voice says to me, just relax next time. We're just trying to tune you up so we can communicate more easily. And at that point, it dawned on me what was happening. The reason being, my girlfriend and I I was helping her study the nervous system because she was training to be a massage therapist, and she was in that course work at the time. And the perineum nerve ends in the sphincter and the genitals. Well, it's the only direct connect into the tip of the spine. So if your technology was capable of adjusting the frequency in another's body, that's where you'd plug in. So there's science behind that. And most of us are, we hear the old anal probe thing, and because in that place, most of us are deathly afraid because there's no control, right? Most of them are paralyzed. I was laughing, so there was no control, because the fear is what they use in order to paralyze the body so that you don't hurt them or you. Right?
Okay, well,
let's go to break.
Yeah, it's time to go to break. And I just want to say, this is actually, you mentioned the International UFO Congress out in Phoenix. So this is a clip, Travis Walton. I was basically asking him how Betty Hill helped him when she was alive. For those of you over on KGRA radio, we'll be right back right after this 3-minute break. Hang in there. Thank you, Kathy. Travis, I'd like to ask you, because I know I had a conversation with you at one time. What did Betty mean to you?
She really figured prominently in my adjustment to what had happened, because Dr. Harder had worked with her, and he was doing the regressive hypnosis on me. And he put me on the phone with her, and she had some words of advice that were really helpful to me in the whole process of adjusting to the experience and to people's reaction to hearing about it.
Yeah, yeah. And speaking of that, when I mentioned earlier, I was talking about the ridicule factor and stuff like that. How has that been in your life?
Well, that, was just so thick you could cut it with a knife at the time. It was all there was, Go out in public and you'd see people, looking sidelong, pointing, whispering, that kind of thing. And nowadays it's completely, done a 180 from that. Every time I go out, I get positive responses from local people. Yeah. Now, I know Jennifer worked with you in a movie, but Fire in the Sky, that's something, it seems like everybody knows that movie. I know that there was a lot of things that were inaccurate. How much has that
if you had to do it all over again, would you have put your foot down, or do you
I think I would have been more insistent on accuracy. They disguised that sort of stuff. The copy of the script that I got didn't contain those alterations, and I think it was a major disappointment for a lot of people. But it was a landmark, for the first time Hollywood ever, took a real life case and dramatized it in a way where people could sort of identify with the people who'd experienced it.
Yeah. And back to Jennifer, what was your, when you decided to do that, did you want to like set the record straight on some things when you worked with Travis on that documentary?
Well, I have to confess, making that film was a bit of a process of self-discovery. I didn't start out making a film. I met Travis at the Roswell conference in 2010. My dear friend Peter Robbins introduced us. We had dinner together, had a bottle of wine and a couple of beers, and I had done some conference organization till that point in my life. I'd been in MUFON about 10 years.
Stand by, coming back in 5 seconds. And 3, 2, 1, go.
All right, welcome back. Let's see. How did that happen? Hang on, everyone, over there at YouTube. Okay. So I'm going to bring my guest back in.
There we go.
Yeah, that was interesting with Travis Walton talking about,
I am
his whole experience.
sure. Absolutely. Travis, so interesting story about Travis, true story. In 1981, when we first moved to Phoenix, I met his sister-in-law, and we were living in the same apartment complex. And we got to talking, and she said, you've got to meet Travis. And his experience, his experience and my white light experience were less than a week apart.
Huh.
And so didn't meet him, didn't follow up. 1997, I was hired to produce the Prophets Conference here in Phoenix. Jim Dilettoso helped get that job for me. And we had about 5,000 people during the weekend, and Travis was one of the people there. I also got a chance to meet Edgar Mitchell, and I'll tell you a little story about him in a minute. But Travis was kind of, he was having some tough times during that period. Fast forward to 2010, the first year of the International UFO Congress in actually at Fort McDowell. And I got in conversation with Travis, and I said to him, I said, because he was really angry still. And I said, is it possible that those guys actually saved your life?
That's
And
what
he
he thinks. Yeah.
And he looked at me like, you son of a bitch, how dare you? Because he had to confront that, because he was asked, right? Now, and his story changed shortly thereafter to include that. 4 years later, I'm guessing, maybe 5, he and I and Miriam Delgado and Jim Dilettoso and Dave Thomas, or Thompson, all of us, but Travis was at the first UFO Congress in Tucson in 1991. But I turned to Travis and I said, hey, Travis, by chance, do you remember the conversation that you and I had back in 2010 when I asked you that question? And he's like, honestly, no, I don't. And I'm like, okay, cool. Well, doesn't matter. Your story changed. That was the important part. You found out that, hey, in actuality, because when he got hit by that static charge, basically, he became the lightning rod when he stood up from the brush pile and was trying to run back to the truck. So when he got hit by that, it's like being hit by lightning, and it probably killed him. And so, they couldn't leave him. That's not their way. So they took him on board, resuscitating, and normally it takes about 5 days to recover, right? If you were in a hospital, recovering from a lightning strike. So, those kinds of things just fit. I'm sure that there were other things involved as well, but just, consider that. So after he changed his story, he really, his whole countenance changed. And I really, I love Travis. He and I, we've got some great pictures together too. But the other, I mentioned Edgar Mitchell, and as the event manager, I had free reign of everything. And I saw Edgar come out indoor. It was an outdoor green room, actually. We had a big building that had 1,200 seats, and then we had 3 tents, 230 by 60 and another 40 by 80. And I saw Edgar come out into the green room, and he pulls a pouch of drum tobacco, hand-rolling tobacco, out of his back pocket. And I'm like, perfect opportunity, because I just happen to have one in my back pocket too. So I walked up and made sure he was watching as I pulled that pouch out of my pocket, and I said, hey, do you mind if we have a smoke together? And it was like the door opened. He said, yeah, come on. We started talking, and we started swapping stories. And after, we had probably half a dozen conversations that were maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes most. And after 3 or 4 of them, he says, and of course I shared with him much of what I've shared with you and more. And evidently he trusted me enough at that point. He says, I'm going to tell you something, but you got to promise me not to say anything to anyone until after I'm dead. And I said, okay. And so, and I'm a man of my word. And he said, when we were going down to the moon's surface, of course, he was pilot of the LEM. He said there was this metallic silver cylinder that was spiraling around the LEM all the way down to the moon's surface. He said, I'm not sure if there was one or more, because it only had that little window. It appeared to be about 1 meter in diameter and about 3 meters long. I knew that it wasn't ours. It wasn't anything any kind of technology that existed on Earth. So the assumption was they were, there's folks on the moon already. Now, he wasn't able to talk about that. I'd already heard about, I think it was Buzz and Neil that through the grapevine had reported seeing those same metallic cylinders standing upright on a rectangular surface just over the dark side of the moon. Those accounts were never verified. And of course, mine hasn't been either. But I didn't say anything about it until after Edgar's death, because that's what he had that's the promise I'd given to him. Now,
well, he seemed pretty open to talk about things. I'm kind of surprised he wouldn't bring that up.
Well, because it was a direct reference of them actually existing on the moon, and that was something that was the kiss of death, right? He was forbade of talking about it, just like all the other astronauts. And, the kind of examples of the kind of information the government's going to give us was, came out in this 9-page report. It's nothing. They don't want us to know. If we did, then we would have information, and that would give us power. Right? And so, what I look forward to is the shifting of attention away from the nuts and bolts to those who've had direct experience and maybe have had involvement over their lifetimes and have gotten to the point where, they're secure in who they are, they're well-respected professionals in various fields and things like that. So their words have a little more impact. And, there's no threat. The only threat is us with each other, right?
Yeah, definitely that. I have some questions that have popped up on
sure.
in chat, so I'm going to start pulling them up. So this person wanted to know, do you think whatever the beings are or whatever your connection is, do you think they're interdimensional?
Yes. And even Wilbert Smith talks about that aspect of it in his memoirs. They refer to the assimilation of consciousness that starts with a point and then the X, Y, and Z axis develops from there. But it's that point of consciousness, right, that then assimilates everything around it. And their ability is to be able to, and they are so far advanced, we can't even fathom the ability of precipitation, let alone materialization or manifesting in a form of any kind, right? We don't even, we have trouble with bilocation and spontaneous teleportation, right? And that does happen. I bilocated. I woke up a guy out of bed, grabbed him by the shoulders 2,000 miles away and sat him up in bed. And he came back and the following week, and I said, hey, did you catch any flack last weekend? Just leaving it open, right? And he says, yeah, you son of a bitch, you woke me up out of bed. And I said, what? He said, yeah, I was laying there sound asleep. I felt somebody grab my shoulders. Sat me up, and I opened my eyes up, and there was your face. And behind your face was Carolyn's face. And that was his girlfriend the year prior. The three of us hung out for the entire school year. And lo and behold, about a week and a half later, a postcard arrives to his address, and it's a Krishna camp postcard with all the addresses up and down the California coast. Now, I'm still in Muncie, Indiana, and the only thing on it was enjoyed the conversation, and it was in Carolyn's handwriting. So those kinds of things do happen. Now, I know enough that I treat it as a sacred ability. And so there's, you just don't use it unless there's absolute need. Well, there's historical references to this kind of ability that's throughout every culture. Even in the Philippines during World War II, that's how they evaded the onslaught, was through telepathic and bilocation and things of that nature. So these references are available. You got to you got to dig to find them. And what I find is that most people, they have an experience and they look to others and they don't do any or little research on their own to see if there's any other significant types of events like theirs that they can reference. Now, I have to say that Ray Hernandez with the Free Organization initially, their book Beyond UFOs, it was based on a bunch of surveys of experiencers. So there are some information in there, but it's still, from my perspective, very cursory. There's no in-depth investigation in this side of things. So, and I know our government's not going to do it because they're reluctant to tell us about the sightings and what they find with that. So they're not going to talk about the efforts of communication, all that kind of stuff that goes on. And yet it's still on.
Here's another one. How do you travel? I don't know if he's saying how do you travel or how anyone would travel between dimensions, which is...
Oftentimes it happens through deep meditation. My experience of it is that when you reach a state of consciousness where you're completely still, there's no thinking, because this is one of the things that's imperative. You cannot think, right? You have to sense. And recently, my wife heard me say this, and so she said, you need to write that down. So we cannot think our way through a system built on vibrations. We have to sense our way through it, right? So in that aspect, in the deep meditation, it almost feels like you drop into another space. And the same thing happens at going up as well. Now, occasionally, when there's the contact experience that's happening, you will feel a rise in your vibratory rate. You'll have a sense that your frequency has increased because you'll hear it. It'll often a very high pitched, even the Hindus have referenced it long ago as the Shabda. They say it's the collection of the vibrations on the planet, and it's a really high pitched tone that you can hear in deep meditation. And at some points for me, it's not tinnitus. I have it almost, whenever I get quiet, I hear it always. But as far as being able to travel in between dimensions, the paradox is that there's extreme discipline and there's an extreme process of letting go, right? And the discipline is in being able to let go and where your attention, your intention, and then your interaction takes place, because these beings are all around us always. We just aren't aware of it. We don't know how to communicate. We don't know how to still the monkey mind enough to actually, ask the right questions and shut up. Right. We lost Martin. Hey, Bill.
Yeah. Hey, what's going on? It's interesting. It's interesting what you're discussing right now. I hear an echo, and obviously my phone is going berserk, so we're gonna throw the phone to the side.
All right.
Yeah. I just want to go back a little bit. How would you assess what's going on right now with everything that's coming out? Because to me, there seems to be two sides developing here.
Oh, here we go with the two sides thing again.
Yeah. We spoke about this earlier because in recent years there seems to be a narrative that we're dealing with malevolent beings or possibly even demonic in nature. It's almost, I would describe it as fear porn. What do you think about what's going on, the state of everything that's going on?
Well, first of all, Bill, I'll just answer it this way. You're going to produce what you believe. And at the core of your being, if you've got some very deep-seated fear, you're going to experience that. And that's also being used as a disinformation process to make us fearful so that we don't engage. Honestly, my personal experience, I have never encountered a malevolent being of any kind off planet or internally. Now that's just me.
But do you think
on that?
In the law of averages, you would think somewhere out there, there's a balance. There's somewhat of a balance. You don't think that exists?
No, I disagree, and here's why.
Okay.
Right? Because advanced consciousness cannot be malevolent. It's just an impossibility at that frequency. It's not natural. What's natural is the balance, is the harmony. And that's what they're trying to get us to understand. What we're doing to each other ain't natural. It's contrived. It's power plays. Jeff Mishlev, when he was interviewing me several years ago, he mentioned that he knew a remote viewer. I can't remember her name, but she had multiple conversations with the folks upstairs. And she said what they say, their view of us is that we have a bunch of pyramidal structures with alpha males at the top that are competing with each other.
Right.
Right.
Zen, I got to tell you, Martin is trying to call me. I think Martin, folks, is having some serious issues. Hold on one second.
All right.
We're actually going to say what's going on with Martin right now. This is live, folks. You can tell it's live. Martin, I am on with your guest. How's your situation with your internet?
We're fine.
I'm rebooting again.
Okay.
Yep.
Hopefully.
So thank you for taking over. I'll get back on as soon as I can.
You got it.
All right. Well, hey, Bill, this gives us a chance to get to know each other.
Yeah, exactly, folks. You heard that live, but this is what happens. Anyway, because I have to say, I've had experiences. I won't say in the nature that you have a direct communication or the higher consciousness, because I've heard a lot about this, the metaphysical aspect of communication, even in the dream state, when lucid dreaming. And I've had experiences that way. I've had very odd experiences. And
Pretty cool, though, huh?
Actually, there was one, I got to be honest with you, there was one instance, and I'm going to tell you, and maybe you can give me your translation. I actually talked to Whitley Strieber about this. And Whitley told me that he actually shocked me because he told me about a situation that happened with him. In one lucid dream, I woke up and I'm walking in through from my bedroom to my dining room, and I see a little gray standing in a corner, like hiding. So I try to run back to my room. There's another one standing at the doorway, and it's letting these little eel-like things come out of on the floor, like it's trying to snap me, but it's not hurting me. It's more like a Velcro-y kind of a thing. So I go in my room and I turn around. There's a grave with a baby in its arms.
That would
And-
kind of make you a little more defenseless.
I don't know if that was to tell me, because ever since I was young, I've always been fascinated with ET. I'm raised a Catholic, and I used to have discussions, argumentative, with my parents about this.
Hmm.
I used to say ET, God is an alien. They were like, "Oh, what? Stop right there!" Really? So
Yeah.
I fall back to sleep. This is about 2:30 in the morning. This is a few years ago in this house, and this house is very active. I got to tell you, honestly. And I've captured something above my house, and then hopefully Martin will one day share this. It's a triangle. There's no doubt about it. It's got a big light in the front, 2 lights. Okay. And I've had documented sightings in the past. So I go back to sleep, and now I'm dreaming again. Now I've got these little beings standing on the side of my bed, and I'm laying flat on my back, and they're attaching like fine fiber optic cables starting from my feet working up to my chest, and that's when I scream with that sleep paralysis kind of a thing, and I'm screaming to wake up. And I don't know how to explain this, but it felt so real.
Okay, so you're familiar with the Chinese datums,
No, I'm not.
Chinese medicine?
Oh, okay, yes.
Okay, the datums, they're like meridians. And so from what you're describing to me, the likelihood is that they were activating your, for lack of a better, tree of life. Okay, that's one reference that could be used in that way. And that, so these obviously you said, there was nothing threatening about it. It was just your inability to be fully present with it, and it kind of freaked you out. Okay, understandably so. Right now, I had to mention Whitley. I've had a few conversations with him as well. One of the things he mentioned at one of his lectures at the International UFO Congress was that we don't understand their consciousness, and we need to look toward understanding it more than trying to deal with the other stuff. Right now, consider this. Whitley is a horror story writer. So this horror story mentality is embedded in him, right? Do you think that's not going to have an effect on his experience, even subtly? More than likely it will, right? Because that's just the nature of consciousness. We can't completely suspend all of our belief systems. Well, we can, but that takes work. Right, but those residual belief systems are always going to be there, and that's going to be a filter for our experience until we can get comfortable or suspend your belief system or whatever is necessary to just be in that free, unattached place to where you're just there, and I'll call it in a fearless, unconditional love, kind of same place where you're just present in the moment without attachment to anything. And this is what they're trying to get us to understand, that this is our design, is to be able to live in that space. And many of us in the last few decades have learned how to grow into that space and live in a state of flow, so to speak. Csikszentmihalyi wrote a book called Flow, The Psychology of Optimal Experience. And how he views it is this, we're like a jazz quartet in an improv moment, right? Where time disappears, ego disappears, you're just having a conversation. Music.
My final comment to you is, I have a definite fear, a phobia. Like I said, I can go on and on. My mom's had an experience in this house, seeing something. But there's a fear factor involved.
Right.
How do you, in a higher consciousness level, create that bridge where that communicating or having that experience exists, but yet you have all these subtle blockers that are in the way? And then you got to be careful. Is this something that you actually want to open yourself up for, the connection itself?
Sure. Great questions. My first response would be, breathe, be aware, sense what's around you, and if there's nothing threatening, there's no reason to be afraid, right? Well, oftentimes we're afraid of an unknown because it's an unknown, right? We've been taught to fear the unknown. What if you don't? Right? What if you gradually allow yourself just to be present? And you know that fear is constricting, right? So your body tenses up and you start, you just condense, right? So you close yourself off and you limit your experience. So in that state, then an opportunity exists to just breathe, work on relaxing. You know, one of the technique, now this may not work for that, but one of the techniques that I teach is just putting your fingertips together and practice feeling your heartbeat in them. And by doing so, you're officially out of your mind because you're not thinking, you're feeling.
Yeah.
So when you can work with that, it allows you to stay out of your mind when you're confronted with those unknowns and those experiences, and it gives you a better place to observe them and to participate in them.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Well,
Okay.
Zan, I want to thank you for the few minutes with you. Martin is here.
That's
Martin,
wonderful.
we're ready to take phone calls, so I'm going to get off here and get ready to take the calls.
Yeah,
All right.
sounds good. Yeah, I'm going to take calls.
See you.
Appreciate it.
So yeah, I have this U.S. cellular. It's called an Orbi. Just I can't really put it here in front of the screen, but I'm telling you, it costs a lot of money to go out. And anyway, so it's working
Yes,
now.
that UAP report, that costs a lot of money too.
That's true. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people want to talk about that. I'm going to open the line so for
right.
anyone that wants to call in. We had a bunch of calls come in, and I'm sorry, a bunch of questions on chat come in. So instead, I just would offer the person on chat to give a call at 855-472-5483. Bill, who you just heard take over while I was absent, he's going to be screening the call. So give us a call with some questions for Zen. And so, like I said, a lot of questions came up. I don't know what you talked about or didn't talk about when I was gone, but I'll find out in the recording, I suppose.
Sure, sure. Now, I did just notice a comment on the right and left brain and talking about sleep and things like that. You know, there's in the two hemispheres, there's also something that we forget about, and that's called the corpus callosum.
Right. It joins the two sides. Yeah.
And the pineal sits on top of that. So not only does it join the two sides, it's the transmitter between the two. So it's the transceiver, if you will, or translator between the hemispheres. So when you are able to find that place of stillness, that's kind of it, where you're in your center, which is, you know, the pineal and the corpus callosum. And we don't think about those kinds of things because we haven't really done enough research into the workings of the brain, you know, beyond the MRIs and figuring out what emotions show where. And, you know, if you stick a needle here, it's going to show up there, right? So these are all kinds of science activities that we haven't been able to explore yet because we're babies in the exploration of consciousness. You know, Jeff Mishla has been at it for almost 40 years now, and he's still just barely scratched the surface with all the guests that he's had. Wealth of resources as well.
Well, so we haven't had any calls come in, so I saw a bunch of the questions come in. That's why I thought there'd be callers. A lot of times people would rather just post their question. But as you can see in chat, there's quite a few people participating.
Like anything, public speaking is the most frightening thing ever.
Let's see. All right. So here's a question here. I don't know if you already answered this question or not. What's the point of traveling to other dimensions? That's kind of an interesting question.
Well, that's a good point, too. What would be the purpose of traveling to other dimensions? Well, my first answer would be in understanding the natural design, we have a perfected form, fit, and function in the world that we aren't aware of. And that aligns throughout the dimensions where we have that stream. It's kind of like the silver cord that people talk about having that OBEs, right? Only this extends from our being here back to the great light. We're not disconnected, but we are. It's like a series of bandwidths, right? Kind of like the rainbow, where each bandwidth has a different frequency, and it's across the electromagnetic spectrum. So as we experience this, we develop a consciousness that is able to use a Heinlein term, grok, that we are more than just this physical body. We know that the mind encompasses much more than just the body, that we have access to all kinds of information beyond the body. Well, what else is there? So the ability of being able to move through other dimensions and adjust to the frequencies, well, that would ultimately affect the physical body and bring it into harmony in the existing surroundings, right? Because that's the ultimate goal, in my opinion, is to be in harmony with people and planet, however that may look. Now, you know, I mentioned perfected form, fit, and function. That doesn't eliminate the division of labor and the different tasks and how societies run, how the world runs, and the different offices and councils and all that kind of stuff, right? Those things don't change. It's the attitude of which we live them does. As you become more aware, you become more considerate, you become more caring and compassionate. You know, that's one of the things that Klaus Schwab wrote in COVID-19, The Great Reset. Don't get me wrong, I don't particularly care for Klaus Schwab and what that element is doing, but he does offer a couple of good questions. One, on a personal level, can we be caring and considerate, or caring and compassionate toward each other coming out of COVID? And the other one is, can businesses be agile coming out of COVID? Because if they're not, they try to use the old patterns, the old ways of doing business. It just doesn't work anymore. So this kind of hedges the edge of, okay, we need a better thinking, a better consciousness, a better attitude, a better awareness of how we deal with each other, and to realize that that's more important, because it doesn't matter what the product or service is, it's people getting the job done. Well, how do you treat people? How do you want to be treated? Right? Do you want to be treated like an asshole? Well, then be an asshole. Right? If you want to be treated like a nice guy, be a nice guy. Be caring and considerate of others. And it really doesn't take that much in the moment to recognize how you're thinking and feeling, and look around you to see if there's a reason to feel threatened or fearful, and there usually isn't, right? So then just relax and be a little more present, be nicer, right? Again, that doesn't change the skill set that you have or the activity that you're involved with. That brings up a conversation Jose Arguelles and I had back in the 90s about the whole process of shifting ages, going from the Piscean to the Aquarian age. And of course, his model was that based on the Mayan calendar, and that there's a 50-year window that opened in 87 and closes in 2037. And the winter solstice of 2012 was the apex. So what happens after the tipping point? You know, the advancement of awareness and consciousness essentially paralleled the information curve up to that point. Well, once you have that awareness and consciousness, what do you do with it? Right? Well, you implement it back into the existing systems. You put it to work in whatever it is you're doing, because it's an individual self-initiating process. Nobody else is going to do it for you, right? So to be able to step up to that, challenge yourself, that's the way. And I guarantee you, you do that, your life will change profoundly for the better. And I live it. You know, I mentioned my wife, Luba. Her name actually means love in Russian, so I actually found my love. But she and I both were fascinated with quantum physics, and she'd been into Tom Campbell for years before we met. And so we have these really deep conversations about regularly, at least on a daily basis at some point during the day, of how we're noticing the synchronicities, the sensations, how nature is responding to our conversations, how we feel, and what that sense brings to us in the outer world, and the reflection that it offers. Now, she's also a conservatory trained pianist from St. Petersburg. So when we first got together, she was just launching her piano studio, and so over time I said, okay, here's what we can do. Let's work on this, and let's develop a consciousness toward this that's collaborative, that's participatory, that's magnetizing. Where the three aspects of that are wherever your attention, your intention, and your interactions occur, that's what you're going to develop, right?
Yeah.
So,
Can we just take a little bit of a jag here? Is that?
oh yeah,
is that
absolutely.
right?
I got off.
We have some callers waiting online. So
Good.
yeah, we have Roots Calhoun calling from Chicago. I saw him in chat earlier.
From Chi-Town. All right, Roots.
Welcome to the show, Roots.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Doing good.
All right.
Thanks for the call. What do you have for our guest tonight?
Yeah, I don't know. Man, there's a bunch of stuff to talk about.
But if you did know, what would that be?
Excuse me?
You said, I don't know. And I said, but if you did know, what would that be?
Yeah, dude, there's a ton of stuff. I got a ton of questions. So maybe I should start at the beginning.
Let's do that.
So when I was like 17, I was talking to my mom. She worked at a CVS. And I like zapped out of my fucking body. Excuse me for my language.
Yeah, we can't go there. Yeah.
Yeah, all right, I'll watch my mouth. I zapped out of my body, and I was above myself, but I was still talking to my mom, and I had a whole conversation with her. And it was one of the scariest moments of my life, and I'll never forget it. And I just want to know what the hell that might be.
Carlos Castaneda would say that was your assemblage point that moved, right? Now, in simpler terms, we have basically three aspects of self. We have our participant, we have an observer, and then we have a manager, right? And so what you became aware of was the observer, because you were able to watch yourself have that conversation. Now, I'm sure the first time it happened, it's probably scared the bejeebers out of you. Because
it was the only time it happened. It's the only time it happened in my life, and
okay.
I will never forget it. It scared the living hell out of me, and even talking about it right now, I have goosebumps.
Okay, good. If you could have that experience again, would you?
Probably not, because it was freaking traumatizing.
Okay. If the trauma were removed, would you?
I mean, that's a tough question.
Well, if you had no trauma, if there was no reason to have trauma or to be fearful, because again, we often traumatize ourselves because of the belief systems we carry. And when we have an absence of what is, or we don't understand what is in the moment, then we revert to basic embedded belief systems, and oftentimes that produces a fearful response, right?
Well, then, yeah. If all trauma was removed, I would probably do it again, because that's kind of cool, like floating in the.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Looking at my body.
Yeah, that's a cool place to be. Now, you can actually develop that to where you can
I want to
watch consider this. If you were able to use that to monitor how you're thinking and feeling without reacting instantly to those thoughts and feelings, would that be of benefit?
Well, yes, I guess. I guess
Okay.
it would.
All right. So just consider that.
It's still kind of scary.
Oh, I can imagine, right? Because you're not used to it. Over time,
Ever had one?
absolutely. I had my first OBE when I was 7. I've had dozens, probably hundreds in my lifetime by now. I'm very comfortable with them. In my 30s, I'd visit psychics, and I was pretty heavily involved with the metaphysical community. And every one of them would say, you're more comfortable out of body than you are in.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm a pretty normal dude. I'm a bricklayer. I live in Chicago, and this stuff is all kind of weird to me.
Sure.
I actually fell down the rabbit hole in 2013 after I saw a black triangle in the sky with my mom, and I started reading about all this stuff and kind of getting into it. And now I'm just I guess I'm a freaking nut. I'm a freaking nut.
Well, I would offer just this one piece of advice. Take it all in. Don't allow your emotions to be managed or piqued or moved in any way. Just observe it and remain free of attachments to whatever it is that it is, right? And this will allow it, in that place, you'll be able to ask clearer questions that will resolve whatever it is to you, because it's designed that way. Reality is designed to reveal itself. The universe has no secrets. It's just waiting for us to ask the right questions. And that applies throughout the engagement of any race that's off planet as well.
My time being cut short.
Well, we do have another caller waiting. You got another quick question?
No. Actually, thank you very much. I appreciate the advice. This podcast rocks. The chat rocks. Shout out to the chat. Salute 07.
Hey, Ruth.
I don't think you're a nut. I
No, I don't either. I don't either.
Think you had an experience.
And if you want some more, if you'd like to chat or talk about it more, just reach out to me. I'm online. I'm available. I don't hide. I answer emails. I answer the phone, and I answer chats usually.
All right.
Right on.
Hey.
Right on. Thank you very much, man. Very nice talking to you, gentlemen.
All right, Roots.
Thanks for the questions.
Thanks for the call. All right, next we have Kevin, and I know who Kevin is from Georgia. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Hey, Martin. Kevin, it's very nice to talk with you. I wish I knew what the previous caller was talking about. I don't want to be redundant.
Oh, you couldn't hear.
Don't worry about it. The redundant systems are everywhere.
All right. Hey, I had to just call and comment. This is the first. You're the first host anywhere on the internet that's kind of echoed my experience. It's not the same, but the same tools. And I have to tell you, it's because of this meditation experience, I eventually got any interest in ufology, because I didn't see the links for a long time. I thought that it was a internal encounters with something other that was important to us. And I just am fascinated by what you're saying. I did it the same way. Calm the mind. It's almost like you're pulling it over yourself. You concentrate, you look for the light, and the light resolves, and it leads someplace that you get sucked into, and you encounter something else. And I don't talk about it much because a lot of people they don't get it. They don't get it. They can't believe that. And they also, they look for an answer, and there's not a answer, whatever it is.
Yeah, there's an answer for you in the moment, but it's not ubiquitous, right? Now,
it's not the same plot, but the let's say the movie might be different.
Sure.
I might get a sci-fi movie, and another one might get a romantic comedy. But in the end, the thing you're supposed to learn or understand is the same.
Yeah, well, as long as Sally doesn't start screaming, right?
Right.
So
But it can lead, in my case, it led to almost a manifestation in real life that affected not just me, but mostly affected my family members.
Sure. Well, and when you develop that consciousness and the stillness, you can actually affect a room full of people when you find your center, and it's noticeable. I've witnessed it. Others have. There's science behind that, for sure. Now, one of the things though, and you mentioned it's a really similar process, and thank you so much for acknowledging the sense making in all of this. If you don't have a direct experience, it's nearly impossible to understand or comprehend or cognate or back to the Heinlein term, to grok what's going on, because you've got no reference. Right now, over a lifetime, you have many reference points that you can build a book of knowledge that you can eventually go back and refer to as, okay, this is a progression of experiences that have led me to this place. And now there's it's almost a logical progression, actually. But then you get to the place where you're on the precipice and you're ready to jump off, not realizing that you do have wings. And that when you do jump off with that leap of logic, all of a sudden, oh, here's a bunch more dots that just got connected, right? Because you've had the presence of mind to ask the questions and build your experience on your direct experience, not on what somebody else says or believes or any of that other stuff. It's based on what you have experienced. And that's all we can do, is base our experience and our understanding on what we experience directly. Now, for many, that's tough to do because there's all these people telling them how to believe, how to feel, who to follow. There's intercessors. There's all this kind of stuff, right?
Right.
It's just
everybody wants the answer. The scientific evaluation of this. It's what we're dealing with is perhaps the world that we live in is opaque to us. We get to see whatever's going on wants us to see. And we're never going to get control of this. This is a soul school.
Well, thinking we can control anything beyond how we think and feel is ridiculous.
Oh, you're exactly right. All right, I just wanted to chime in and tell you how much I appreciate
thank you, Kevin.
what you've shared, and I'll pay more attention to you, Kevin.
All right. Thank you for the call.
It's Zen.
All right, we have Jeff from Indiana. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Oh, another Hoosier.
Yeah. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good evening.
And in case we don't see you, good morning.
I kind of missed the podcast here. I thought it was going to come on at 10 o'clock. I thought I was listening to a recording. Yeah, okay.
Nope, you're live.
You got a question for our guest, Jeff?
Yeah, I'm located in Indiana. Okay.
Whereabouts? I grew up in Alexandria.
I'm down here by Cincinnati and West Harrison, Franklin County.
Okay. That's a little ways away. Anyway, your question.
Oh, I'm on. I'm sorry. Okay. I was just wondering, do we have anything right as human beings? Because it just seems like we don't progress socially or ethically or morally for hundreds of years. No matter how. If we acquire a degree of empathy, but it's so easily lost, and then we go the other track, But right. I have so many questions for you. If you know these, I mean, is this when we travel or when we become an existence? You're talking about a soul here? Our energy is a soul, and it's created when we're born.
By any other name? Well, it's not necessarily created when we're born. that point of light that I mentioned, I don't know if you were listening earlier. So I had I'll just refresh. I had a near-death experience, for lack of a better, as a teenager, where I went into the light and I returned. I knew from that, the essence of that knowledge was that we are cosmic consciousness condensed into form. That centered of that consciousness within us, we call a point of light, right? So that point of light bounces back and forth between incarnations and the great light as we progress through our understanding and ability to navigate reality better. Right. There's another book you might read, excuse me, by William Buhlman. Just look up the author. It's Buhlman, I believe. And of course, you could also read Stubbing My Toe on Purpose. But what we are is this consciousness that evolves over time. And yes, as humans, we are getting some things right. We know how to love people unconditionally. That's the first step, right? Yeah. Now, how, as we develop relationships, for instance, my wife and I, she's from St. Petersburg, Russia. I grew up in Alexandria, Indiana. I was born in Indianapolis. So I'm kind of a kid from Hicksville, right? So I'm American, she's Russian. We have the same feelings, but we express them completely differently, right? So it took us several years to figure out that, oh, the way we express towards each other are cultural differences, not necessarily differences in how we think or feel, right? It's how we communicate. Now there's a huge movement going on right now about sense making. So if you're familiar with that term, I would look further into that. There's a guy named Otto Scharmer that's doing some courses at MIT on a thing he calls Theory U. And he talks about co-presencing and co-sensing. And that's when you get a group of people together that can shut up long enough to allow those thoughts and feelings to bubble up as to where to go with their project or their directions or whatever, right? So in other words, you got to slow down to go fast, right? So we don't know how to slow down. We expect everything immediately. We have muck enlightenment. You know, we drive through McDonald's and we expect to get our, you know, metaphysical doctorate or whatever, right? It just don't work that way. It's a slow, arduous process. And we get impatient along the way. And that's kind of built in because it's in the programming that we've had over the years or decades or even centuries in our bloodlines, right? Because you carry the memories of your bloodline. We don't realize that that's also part of what we carry in consciousness. And some of these issues that we have in this life may have to do with something that we experienced elsewhere. That could be a past life. It could be a different planet even. But it's something that's coming up because it's a repeating pattern that we have to address, and we haven't yet. What you resist persists, right? Yeah, resistance is futile. Not that we're going to be a Borg consciousness, right? That's not it at all. Because the individuation of consciousness are like threads in a tapestry. We each have one. And it's different than the next person. They're like snowflakes. No two of us are the same, but we can feel the same, right? We can feel that unconditional love. We can feel the depth of love that we have for our spouse or for our children, right? Do we have that same kind of feeling for our neighbor or the person you meet on the street? And if not, why not? Because that's
I'm really not that religious, but basically you're saying to be how Jesus said to be. You know, Jesus was a total pacifist. But I don't want to get into religion or anything like that.
You know, it's beyond religion. That's why I put a video together that demonstrates that this concept is throughout all religions and it's not affiliated with any one of them specifically. It's ubiquitous.
I thought that was interesting when you said that religion was an argument between people about the same thing. I never thought about it that way. That's really a cool observation.
Yeah, it really is. And you know, when you suspend your belief system long enough to acquiesce to what is and not what you believe it to be, because you can ask questions and nature. One of the things, Martin, this is one of the other things that Wilbur Smith said. The people from elsewhere told him, if you've got questions, ask Mother Earth. Okay, think about what that means. The consciousness of Mother Earth is just the same as our consciousness, and we have access to it just like any other planetary system, right? And we learned kind of sort of about that when the Gaia principle came out, but we don't realize the depth of what that really means.
All right. Well,
So
we
are we over and over incarnated entities that are we a one and out, you know, one off?
Survey says yes, we are. I don't care, right? All I care about is what I'm doing in the present moment and the best that I can be in that moment to fulfill my desire of loving the person in front of me as deeply as I possibly can and communicating with them in such a way that demonstrates it.
All right. So I'm sorry we had to cut that short because I want to get one more caller in from Alberta. We have, trying to look at the name, Kim from Alberta.
Hello, Kim.
Hello, Martin. How are you doing this evening? I guess afternoon or whatever, wherever you are in this North America or world we live in.
We only get, that's great to hear from you. We only have 2 minutes just to let you know.
Okay. I was going to be quick here. Zen, I love what you're talking about. Experiences it. I've had too many, but I had one in Tel Aviv in Jerusalem years back where I got lost and I had a friend with me who started panicking and had to get the hell out of there very quickly. And I had a gentleman come around the corner with a Coleman lamp and a monk outfit. That's all I can say. And he walked up to me and started talking to me. Well, it turned out that the guy talking to me was from my city. He worked actually across the street from me, which was a church. And I happened to run into him in Jerusalem, directing me the way out of there. And an evening of kind of craziness, and I got out, but the friend I was with completely didn't believe it and thought it was a ghost. And my question to you is just coincidences, and if you believe that we could be split in spirit and have like many experiences on this planet at one moment. And I'll leave it to be. Thanks, Mark. And hi to Renee. Hi to Bobby. Hi to Dave, and hi all you guys, and hi to all the talk guys, and I'll leave it with all you guys.
Well, there's an example of that in Guy Ballard's books about Sanat Kumara, that Sanat Kumara is a planetary logos, and he supposedly had to fragment his consciousness into 1,000 bodies simultaneously in order just to gain the office. So that's just one example. I've had personal experience of being able to bilocate multiple places, and so I know that that's possible from direct experience. Now, would I do that on a regular basis? Probably not. That was enough just for me to know that in my direct experience that it happened. So these things are valid for me, and I would assume, without making an ass out of myself or you, that it's possible for others, right? Because all these things that I'm doing, I know are possible for others as well. If I did it, so can others.
Well, we are at the end of our time here. So thank you so much. All right. All right. Thank you very much. Take care. All right. All right, everyone. So don't forget to tune in next week at 5 o'clock. I'm going to be on location in the Berkshires. It's going to be a heck of a show. And thanks so much for watching and listening tonight. Sorry for the technical glitch. And remember to keep your eyes to the sky.